Good evening, and welcome to tonight's debate on one of the most debated issues in cultural heritage. Should historic artifacts be returned to their countries of origin? On one side, we have Amara Blake, who argues that returning cultural artifacts is a moral obligation and an essential step toward healing historical injustices. On the other side, Professor Eli Mendoza believes that such actions could harm cultural institutions and limit access to history and education. Let's dive into the debate. Amara Blake, we'll begin with you.
Cultural artifacts are not just objects. They are representations of a nation's history, identity, and heritage. Keeping these artifacts in foreign museums or private collections deprives the people of the country of origin of their right to connect with their own cultural history.
While the return of cultural artifacts may seem like the right thing to do, it is important to consider that many artifacts are currently housed in world-renowned museums where they are preserved, studied, and shared with the global public. These museums offer invaluable education and insight into diverse cultures.
Many of these artifacts were taken during periods of colonization, often through force or coercion. Returning them is an act of justice, acknowledging the wrongs of the past and righting historical injustices.
Artifacts that have been in museums for centuries have become part of global heritage. Their removal could deprive the global public of the opportunity to appreciate and learn from them in a universal context.
Artifacts are deeply tied to cultural practices, traditions, and spiritual beliefs. By keeping them abroad, we are denying indigenous communities the chance to continue to honor their heritage in meaningful ways.
Museums have the resources, expertise, and infrastructure to properly conserve and protect artifacts. Many countries of origin, especially those with unstable political environments, lack the resources to ensure that these artifacts are preserved for future generations.
The return of cultural artifacts can help heal historical wounds, build stronger international relationships, and foster greater understanding between nations. It's a tangible way to show respect for a country's sovereignty and cultural heritage.
The idea of returning artifacts assumes a simplistic view of cultural ownership. Many of these items were acquired legally or through diplomatic means at the time and are now part of the shared heritage of humanity, not just one nation or people.
The rightful owners of these artifacts, often marginalized communities, have a right to reclaim their heritage. Artifacts are part of their collective memory, and their return would be a recognition of the value and importance of that heritage.
By removing artifacts from international institutions, we risk turning them into nationalistic symbols rather than universal cultural treasures. The cultural significance of an artifact often transcends national borders, and keeping them in prominent museums allows for a broader, more inclusive understanding of their meaning.
Museums and institutions that house these artifacts often fail to provide proper context or meaningful representation of the cultures from which they came. Returning artifacts would allow for the rightful telling of these stories in the proper cultural and historical context.
Some artifacts have been part of collections for so long that they have become integrated into the cultures where they are housed. Returning them could result in a loss of their broader impact and educational value, which could hinder their true cultural appreciation.
The return of cultural artifacts could boost national pride and cultural tourism. Countries would have the opportunity to create exhibits that tell their own stories, engage their citizens, and preserve their traditions for future generations.
Rather than returning artifacts, we should focus on facilitating greater access to these items through digital technologies, virtual exhibitions, and international collaboration. This allows people around the world to connect with cultural heritage without the complexities of physical repatriation.
While Western museums argue that they have better resources to care for these artifacts, the advances in conservation technology and training in many countries of origin mean that these nations can now properly care for and protect their cultural treasures.
Many of the countries that demand the return of artifacts lack the infrastructure to properly protect and display them. Without proper conservation and security, there's a real risk that these artifacts could be damaged or lost in the process.
The practice of taking artifacts during colonial times was often accompanied by violence, exploitation, and disrespect for the cultures from which they were stolen. Returning these items is one way to begin to repair some of the damage done during this dark chapter in history.
A wealth of historical artifacts exists in museums around the world, including many that were obtained through trade or diplomatic channels. The principle of return would be difficult to apply universally, as it could create a never-ending series of demands and disputes.
Other countries, such as Greece with the Elgin marbles and Egypt with the Rosetta Stone, have successfully advocated for the return of their cultural heritage. These cases show that returning cultural artifacts is not only possible, but also a necessary step towards justice.
Cultural preservation is about more than the physical artifacts themselves. It's about ensuring that communities have the resources to protect, learn, and benefit from their culture. Simply returning objects may not be enough if the broader systems of support are not in place.
Cultural preservation is not about just keeping artifacts in a museum. It's about ensuring the people of that culture can maintain a connection to their past and share it with future generations. Returning artifacts is part of preserving the culture itself.
The argument that returning artifacts will heal historical wounds oversimplifies the complexities of colonial history. While repatriation may seem like a simple solution, it doesn't address the broader socioeconomic issues or the continuing impacts of colonialism.
By returning these artifacts, we demonstrate that respect for cultural heritage transcends borders. It is a recognition of the shared responsibility of humanity to protect, preserve, and honor the diversity of cultures around the world.
If countries are allowed to demand the return of cultural artifacts, it could lead to a situation where every nation starts to claim artifacts from abroad, creating tension and eroding the notion of shared cultural heritage.
In an era of global cooperation, returning artifacts fosters a sense of mutual respect and recognition of cultural diversity. It's a vital step toward building a more equitable and just global community.
Museums around the world are not just places of preservation, but also centers for research and learning. They allow scholars and experts from around the world to study artifacts, fostering cross-cultural understanding and respect.
Returning artifacts would also help to prevent them from being lost to time or sold on the black market, as many of these items are under threat of theft or damage in foreign collections.
A global exchange of culture, where artifacts are shared, studied, and respected, helps to build bridges between nations. A policy of unilateral repatriation undermines the cooperative nature of global cultural exchange.
Thank you both for an engaging and thoughtful debate. As we've heard, the question of whether historic artifacts should be returned to their countries of origin is complex and multifaceted. On one hand, repatriating these artifacts can promote justice, cultural healing, and equity. On the other, keeping them in international institutions allows for shared global understanding, greater preservation capabilities, and the ability to educate the wider world. The decision of whether or not to return artifacts goes beyond simple ownership. It's about balancing respect for history with the practicalities of preserving and sharing cultural heritage. We leave it to you. Should these priceless objects return to their homeland? Or are they better off in the museums that have preserved them for the global community?